You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is Thanksgiving, November 26, 2020, and we're going to have a conversation with Lance Redhawk Shauger. Now, Lance is a Seneca and New Jersey Sandhill Lenape Cherokee. He has been on police SWAT teams. He's been chief of the NJSH Tribal Law Enforcement Division, 2012 to present Red Chief of the New Jersey Sandhill Band. He's going to join us for a Thanksgiving conversation about relations between, I guess, just what Thanksgiving is and the relations between our people. So we're just going to get right down to it. We'll be right back with Lance Redhawk Shauger right after this. So welcome back to Conflict Radio. We've got Lance Redhawk Shauger on the line with us. Lance, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Now, it is Thanksgiving, and I find it very awesome that we're doing a show together, Lance. What tribe are you from?
Well, I'm half Seneca, and I'm half New Jersey, Sandhill, Delaware, Lenape. According to blood quantum, you can only be what your mother is. And so that is the way I'm documented.
All right, awesome. So I wanted to talk to you about Thanksgiving. Now, I guess growing up, you and I grew up as kids together, and we've always known, like, we've kind of seen the pictures of the first Thanksgiving with the pilgrims gathered around outside at, like, what looked like a picnic table. And, you know, the pilgrims on one side and the Indians on the other, and, you know, we were having a great meal together. Is that how it was?
My personal opinion, and what I know about historical fact, that is really not how it was. You have to understand the times. The early colonists, they were starving. They didn't have crops in the ground, so they really didn't have any vegetables, and they were loaded with illness. And so Tisquantum, a.k.a. Squanto, had made friends with a few influential people within the community there. And so the reason Thanksgiving is so important to the foundation of America's society is because Tisquantum brought not only enough food for the day, but he brought enough food and continued to bring food to last them through the winter, or they would have died of starvation.
So it's kind of like one squirrel helping out the lazy squirrel.
Well, I don't think it was so much a lazy squirrel in this scenario. I think it was they you know, you have to understand, put yourself mentally in that time era. Yeah. Okay, you traveled here for months across an ocean, and then you get here, and you really don't know how to survive. It's a totally different terrain. It's a total different animals, total different everything. And so I don't think it really had to do with them being lazy. They were busy doing what they knew. And as far as survival, where they were from, and it was totally different here.
All right. Now, you and I have talked before about the Knights Templar and how they were over here many years before, like, the Pilgrims came, correct? Is that why?
Absolutely.
Is that why you think the Indians were so caring towards the Pilgrims and was able to help them out? Did they think that they were the Knights Templar?
Well, I think they you know, a lot of natives had already had, especially in that area, had already had contact with the Knights Templar. And I think the Knights Templar, I think they very much acted and carried themselves in a different way, a way that was more in balance, a way that native people could more understand. And so the trust that was given to the early colonists, I truly do believe, came from the relationship that was built with the Knights Templar prior to them arriving. Columbus did not discover America. Okay, we were here long before Columbus came. That would be like me going to England right now and going, "Hey, I discovered this place." No, I didn't. You know. So with the Knights Templar, they had been here. They had lived among natives, and they had built up a solid relationship. As a matter of fact, my understanding is Columbus's relative was one of those people. And Columbus had a map to get here, so he didn't discover anything.
So when you say the Knights Templar was here, how long were they here before the colonists arrived?
They were here well over 50 years prior to Columbus. You can actually see what I would guess I would call ruins of their architect. I believe there's some in Massachusetts, so yeah, they were definitely here.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So what do you think? What do you think went wrong?
I think when you study history, you come to one conclusion, no matter who you are, if nothing else. And England and Spain and all of the countries that came here early on, they sent the worst people that they had here because they realized that it was a rugged terrain. And obviously, they didn't want to house or imprison. A lot of people who were sentenced to death were actually sent here as a way to not be executed, to start colonies, to colonize, and to claim land in the name of, whoever they were serving. Um, One of the biggest things everyone thinks is, the reason why Spain and Europe flocked here was for the gold, and that's partially true. But more so, it was more for lumber because they had over harvested lumber in their countries, and so they came here and they knew about the lumber because the Templars had already been here, and so that's why they came in droves. It was more for the lumber than it was the gold. The gold was a secondary fact that was found out afterwards.
So how far west do you think the Templars made it?
I'm not really clear on that. I'm certain they probably made it at least to the Mississippi. There's rumor, and it's rumor, so it's not necessarily my opinion or something I can back up with fact. But there's rumor that they've made it as far as the Lakotas.
Yeah, that's fascinating that they would get that far. Now, there's all kinds of different tribes in America at this time, right? Do you think that that were there a lot of warring tribes that would like war with each other, or did they pretty much get along and it was only later on that they didn't? I mean, did they get
Are we
along?
talking about the time frame of
Yeah, like
early
the Templars
colonists
here. So
Thanksgiving time frame?
yeah, so if the Templars were here, I mean, I'm talking before the colonists when the Templars were here. So if the Templars were here, and let's just say they landed in Massachusetts, say, and they were friendly with that tribe there, and then they started going west, and they would leave that tribe that they were friendly with and move on to another tribe, right? Would they have to start all over again, or would one tribe tell the other tribe like, hey, these people are pretty cool?
Well, you have to understand on the East Coast, yes, there were many tribes, and most of which came under one of two, for lack of a better term, because we didn't really have like a rule like how you would think about it with kingdoms. Okay, we didn't have that concept. We had a true democracy. But you were either looking at someone who was Haudenosaunee, a.k.a. French word Iroquois, which loosely translates to adders, meaning a negative derogatory term. So many of us we don't really like the term Iroquois, though it is what is written in history and documents and such. So, with that said, there was really two major strongholds for a seat of power, for lack of a better term, which were the Iroquois and the Algonquin. Okay, and there were many tribes that fell under each of those. Okay, so that takes you as far away as the other side of the Mississippi, because the Seneca were in Ohio. The Algonquin pretty much ranged from Canada clean down through, Georgia. You found Haudenosaunee people here in North Carolina, Georgia, You'll hear in the Great Law, if you ever read the Great Law, they talk about the bowl where there's no weapons or no fork, knife supposed to be brought to harm someone by accident to cause a war. That was because that was neutral hunting ground. So North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, that was the bowl that is spoken of, and it was fertile hunting grounds. So, pretty much clean down the East Coast from Canada, clean to Florida, you would have been dealing with many tribes, but all of those tribes would have been under one or the other seat of power, so to speak. And I know in history it is discussed that there was a lot of warfare between the Algonquin and the Iroquois, and there was at times. However, you have to understand the structure the way it was then. Okay, now we have, the Haudenosaunee, we have the Five Nations Iroquois Confederation, and now the Tuscarora have come north, and so it's referred to as the Six Nations Iroquois Confederation. But the Algonquin, they were the grandfathers, okay, and you have to understand the structure. That's why the Delaware are referred to as the grandfathers, and then you have the elder brothers. You have the Seneca, the Onondaga, and the Mohawk. They were the elder brothers, and then you have the Cayuga and the Oneida, which are the younger brothers, and everyone else fell beneath that in a family line, meaning that was the structure of hierarchy, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So yes, as they went beyond those borders, they would have had to start fresh as far as building relations.
All right. So, curious, we did a show not too long ago on the Cherokee Little People. Have you heard of these Cherokee Little People?
I have. The Cherokee, you have to understand, the Cherokee were the keepers of the southern route, okay? They're Haudenosaunee people as well. Now, today, they're all independent, and I get that, and I respect that fully, but we're talking of this time era. Mm-hmm. And, they were the keepers of the southern route, like the Ojibwe were the keepers of the northern door, and then, you have the Seneca and the Mohawk as the eastern or the western and eastern doors. And so that was what basically outlined the league of the said Iroquois, okay? But you have to understand what's not discussed is the Great League, which encompassed all of North and most of South America. It was all under one confederation. So we have our version of the Little People as well. And I would prefer, honestly, not to discuss much about that.
Okay.
But yes, I have heard of it. I'm familiar.
Okay. Were they the, I guess, you don't want to talk about it, but I can say Moon-eyed people, right?
That's not the terminology that I'm familiar with, though I do know what you're talking about. And so basically, since we're on this topic and we're going to obviously discuss it, we're the Little People, or in the way you're discussing it or bringing it up, the Moon-eyed people, they were little people. They were magical beings. They were more spiritual than physical, though they encompassed both. And they were their own people. They were a race of people that once existed here, and some beliefs still do. There are ceremonies that are specifically designed, especially during midwinter, because sometimes these entities, they were a bit mischievous. And so they would occupy your space or your dwelling, and so it took ceremony to rid a household of them.
Okay, but they were physical beings, right? They weren't manifestations?
They were physical and they were spiritual. It just depends on which plane they chose to take at the time.
Do you think that they're interdimensional?
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying to you.
Yeah. All right. Well, so
we can discuss that more if you would like. We can discuss that more in private.
Yeah.
and you'll understand why I don't want to put it out as a
Yeah, I think
national podcast. This information, you have to understand there's certain things within the Native community that are protected. Even what you find on the internet is so watered down and barely touched on that it's not of any consequence.
so. Could you say that there were different interdimensional beings than just those?
You mean other than just the little people?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It is said that, the creator's herd, basically, for lack of a better term, guards the gate to what was all pushed into, for lack of a better term, the underworld. And the guardians of that gate are the white deer. And I don't mean albinos. I mean the white deer, and they're literally white. They're not albinos because they have color in their eyes. And it's said that when the last of the creator or God's flock has been killed, that it will open that door because there'll be nothing left to protect it and keep the things that don't belong here where they belong.
Yeah. Now, is this something that the colonists would have had an issue with as well in that time frame? Would there have been a lot of interdimensional beings around when they were first getting here?
Not necessarily at that time. This was before colonists arrived. Though the little people were still here at that time, they weren't very much in strength. They're still here now. It's just, we're discussing something that is metaphysical that also was able to obtain the physical. And as I said, this is not something that's really talked about at great length. It's not something that is common knowledge, and it is not something that is really shared. So, it's got me a little bit in an uncomfortable state, but I'm discussing it with you because we have known each other since childhood. And I know this is something that you are seeking knowledge on.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I'm discussing it further than I would normally.
Okay, well
talk.
let's change the subject then. Let's talk about religion. Now, when the Templars came here, they obviously had their own religion with Christianity, I suppose, and some people might even debate that, like what they were actually running from when they came here. What is the Native American people's stance on religion? I mean, obviously it's not Christianity, right? At that time.
Well, I will discuss my personal thoughts. I won't speak for a nation. Okay. As with this entire podcast, I'm discussing my personal opinion. I'm not necessarily speaking for an entire nation or nations of people. With that said, religion is an organized thing. Okay. Christianity, in my opinion, is a belief. It's not a religion. Okay. The religion part of Christianity is the corporate, in my opinion, is the corporate structure. You see, when you go to church and you pay tithes, that's the religion part of it, okay, because that's what keeps the church up and running, okay, but that has nothing to do with a personal spiritual relationship that most people have or should have with aka God or Yah or Yahweh, okay, or Yahweh, okay. See, the personal relationship is spiritual. The corporate structure of what has become religion, that is religion.
Yeah.
So yes, it was very different. It was very different back then because I think people, the Christianity was building momentum globally at that time, and I think most of the people who came here, I think they were spiritual, but at the same time, you have to understand religion was well founded in their belief as well as the spiritual aspect of it. So
what are we missing What do you think?
That
What do you think all of this is? What do you like personally? What do you think all of this is? Do you think we live in possibly a matrix? Do you think there's some people that think that our consciousness isn't correct? You know, we're only using 15% of our brains, and that we're not experiencing the Earth the way that we were meant to, because our brains are suppressed in sort of a way that we're not seeing. Like there's 5D obviously all around us, but we can only see 3D. You know, what are we missing? You know what I mean? What do you think's really going on?
I think we live in an age where people are so consumed by just the struggle to survive to pay taxes, and what they're not focused on, or I should say it differently. I think beyond that focus, they're focused so keenly on what is going on in the media that they lose the beauty of life. They lose the fact that Mother Earth is really what's important, that the relationship that you have with your Creator and the Mother Earth is important. For instance, most people are more concerned about putting food on the table than they are about building a relationship with their Creator. And it just happens. It's a perpetual thing. And so I think a lot is lost in that relationship with Creator, with God, with the things that are truly important. Most people, if you ask them when the last time was that they went out and they actually enjoyed walking through a field and studied a blade of grass, I bet you they would look at you dumbfounded, because they don't have that relationship with the earth. The earth is an expected thing. You know, we talk about millennials expecting everything. You know, I've heard many conversations about that. You know, they just expect a good paying job. They just expect to be taken care of. Well, I think that's kind of the pot calling the kettle black, because I think a lot of people overlook the fact that the earth is here, and the earth is our mother. And if we don't protect it, you know, we will wipe ourselves out of existence. We're polluting the earth at a exaggerated rate. Corporate greed becomes more important than clean water. And when you see things like that in society, it really makes you stop, or it should make you stop, and really take notice that what is important to us and our priorities have really become polluted and diluted. And so that's the best I can do to answer that question. I just don't think people's perspective is really leaning in the right way at this point in time.
Yeah, it's kind of all about, you know, the collection of matter, right? We collect these things that are made out of matter, which in reality are nothing. You know, we get so obsessed with collecting these things of matter that we're really missing the bigger picture, you know.
Well, everything is connected and interconnected, both physically and metaphysically. You know, even if you look at Christianity, and I'm not Christian, though I don't talk against Christianity, but even if you look at Christianity, you know, it talks about what is on earth is in heaven. You know, if you look at artwork, it depicts, you know, what is believed to be like heaven. And then, you know, in many belief systems globally, you know, there's this tree that ascends into heaven through earth and into hell. You know, everything is connected and interconnected. And until mankind truly realizes that and takes it to heart, both physically and metaphysically, both physically and spiritually, you know, we're going to continue in a destructive phase of humanity until we either realize that or wipe ourselves out.
Yeah. Do you think that God is a man or a woman?
I think that you know, depending on who you talk to, and I know everyone has their opinion and belief, I think that if you are the creator of everything within the universe of universes, I think you just are. I don't think. I think that's human ignorance to label, as far as God, as far as the creator of all things that are good. I think it's our ignorance to have to put a label of male or female on it. We have to make sense of it, and that's part of how we do that.
Now, Christianity has, I guess, I'm sure you've heard of it, the Book of Revelation, where it kind of prophesizes end times and talks about, different catastrophes that could possibly take place in the future. Do Indian tribes, or I guess that's a word, do they have prophecies of their own in their religion?
I mean, there are many prophecies, and it's not just natives, it's not just First Nations people that have prophecies.
Yeah.
Globally, you'll find prophecies among all the different beliefs, and we could spend an entire show jumping from belief system to belief system on what is believed as far as the end of days. Some people believe that there are, there will be 5 worlds. Other people believe like what you're discussing as far as the end of days. I think all have validity.
What are some of yours?
Well, once again, I'm going to speak from a personal aspect. I think.
I think I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, my service is kind of bad, so it kind of cuts out from time to time. I think personally, I think everybody has their belief, and I don't want to necessarily speak on mine because I don't want to make it sound like I am discrediting someone else's belief, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone's belief. I think whatever you believe, I think you should believe in it wholeheartedly, as long as it's not destructive. Like by that I mean, as long as you're not doing harm to the earth, as long as you're not doing harm to other people, as long as you're not trying to control or destroy, what is here, what is part of creation. I think it's valid. And I think that speaking my personal opinion of what I think the future holds, I think is irrelevant. I'm too humble to actually bring myself to do that.
All right.
If you want to have a personal conversation, we can.
All right. Okay. Now, I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of people out there that believe that the human civilization, just humans in general, have lived for millions and millions of years on this planet, and there's very little evidence of what they've left behind simply because it was so long ago. Like there was, technologically advanced humans that once inhabited the earth. What do you think about that?
I think life in general is circulatory. I think it will revolve. I think we reach a certain point of existence in mankind, and I think we bring ourselves, to a point where we can't go any further, and mankind seems to have, for lack of a better term, a destiny or a will to control and conquer. And I think we bring our civilization time and time again. I think we set ourselves back and have to start over. It's like a reset. When we get too far along, when we start trying to take the place of creator and we overstep our bounds, I think we get a reset.
Yeah. Were there any native stories of alien encounters?
I'm not necessarily familiar with alien encounter in the terminology and the way you're talking. I do know that there are, if you talk to natives, you'll find people who can talk extensively on blue star people, and that type of stuff. Now, that's not something that I necessarily am able to discuss today, but I do know that there are different beings that are here that weren't always from here. Most people, if you ask them globally, I'm talking like tribal traditional people, and you ask them, who they are, if you ask me, I'm going to say I'm Ongwe Ongwe, okay, which everyone will have their own word for, but what it breaks down to is I'm a real human being or person. And I know you can get into Black's Law Dictionary for those people out there who's all about definitions. And, a person means one thing and a human being means another, but I'm just loosely translating for the topic of conversation.
All right. So, we see, hieroglyphics in Egypt of, possible UFOs coming down, and that was thousands upon thousands of years ago. Why do you think that there's not really any massive monuments on the Americas that that are like the Great Pyramids or Stonehenge or things like that? Are there things like that are here that we're just not seeing? Or
well, there's things like that were here that you have to understand. First, let me back up a little bit in reference to where you're talking about spacecraft.
Okay.
You can also look at a lot of the pictures. There's artwork that was done of the birth of Christ and the manger. And if you look on that artwork, and I honestly, I forget the artist that did it, but I know it's a famous piece. You'll see a beam of light coming down. Well, if you follow that beam of light back into the upper left side of the corner, you'll see what looks like a spaceship. There's a lot of things like that in artwork, along with the Egyptian hieroglyphics that you can see that supported from a different location on the earth and things of such. Now, back to your question, we had our versions of pyramids. We had our versions of all of that. You have to understand there has been a huge push for the last 500 and some years to destroy anything that gives validity to the fact that natives were from here. Everyone's always trying to place us somewhere else. For a long time, the common belief was, across the Bering Strait, natives came here from, crossing, I'm not saying that never happened. I'm not saying that there wasn't people who crossed both ways. But I think if you look at things, one thing that doesn't lie is linguistics. Linguistics will place a person, if you follow linguistics back far enough, linguistics will place a person to a location. Okay? Natives were always here. You see, it's a big black eye for the United States being the peacekeepers and being the defenders of freedom to have the fact that they committed the largest Holocaust possibly in global history with the destruction of native peoples here, where they intentionally used germ warfare. You see, so we went into an age where, like, Pratt's boarding school came about. His idea was basically to destroy, I forget the exact terminology he used, but basically destroy the Indian and save the man. And so his goal, and the government's goal back then, was to eliminate anything that would give native people strength. And part of that was destroying burial sites. Part of that was destroying monuments. Part of that was destruction of everything that natives knew. Because then, as generations went on, all they would have is what they were given. They would Americanize. That was the hope.
Yeah.
You see, so we had our versions of pyramids. The reason you don't find a lot of burial sites up to a certain point in remains is because burial came about very much as a Christian belief. There's still a lot of more primitive nations and tribes globally who still cremate. Okay, the whole burial idea came from it's believed basically that when you cremate someone, if they return here in a reincarnated form of life, if you cremate them, they will return with all of their knowledge of their past life. where if you bury them, they'll lose that. And that's something that is not commonly known or understood. But when buried, you're supposed to be buried facing west, not just buried any way you're put to be organized in a cemetery plot.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to that.
Huh. That's interesting. I had never heard that before. Maybe that would explain why some people remember their past lives and some people don't. Like
that is very possible.
Yeah, like if that indeed is the case, you know. So what do you think? Do you think there is such thing as reincarnation, that we come back?
You know, I don't know. I know that I've heard some people who believe it fervently, and I know other people who don't believe in it at all. So as for me personally, I really don't know. It's not something that I've really given a lot of thought to or a lot of research into.
Yeah. So what do you want to talk about?
Well,
we've got some time to kill.
We can continue on the Thanksgiving thing, and on that theme. And I know we've kind of jumped all over the place.
Yeah. I'm trying to get as much as I can out of you.
Well, you could just invite me back for other more specifically topic of discussion, and we could just continue it on another time. For one thing I do want to say is, I know everyone across the nation is celebrating Thanksgiving. And so I just want to have just a few minutes to just loosely discuss kind of what's on my mind instead of it being, questions and answer. We've already discussed the side of Thanksgiving and why it's important to the American populace and society, okay? Because it's basically believed that the country wouldn't have survived. It would have, the colonists would have died and such. There are still natives, though, who view today as the National Day of Mourning, okay? Not mourning as in the sun come up, but mourning as in grief.
Yeah.
Pain. Okay? I spoke a little bit about Pratt, very little. However, you have to understand, I am one of those people. I believe today is the National Day of Mourning because of all the atrocities that was done, the dehumanization that was done to Native peoples nationwide. You can't really look at it in the full scope and think one tribe was treated more harshly than another. There was horrible dehumanizing things that occurred to each nation, in each tribe, in each group of peoples. Okay, so I take today being the National Day of Mourning, and I fast, no food, no water, and generally I stay in prayer the entire time. Okay, I had promised you a while ago I would do this, and so I'm doing it. I'm doing it for you and for the relationship you and I have built through the years. But that's what today is to me. And though I do give thanks, but I give thanks every day. It's not just on Thanksgiving that I give thanks. Every day I give thanks for all the things that I do have, you see?
Yeah.
So, that's, I think, important to explain as well. We're still in the termination era of Indian law. That's pretty self-explanatory, I think.
Do you think the relationship between the United States government and the Indian nation is getting worse?
Well, I've still yet to see a single president, Congress, Senate. I've still yet to see anyone of a political figure honor a single treaty nationwide, not just with any of my people, with any Native people. Okay, a treaty becomes one with the Constitution, as therefore is the binding law, the first binding law, and yet they ignore it. As a matter of fact, you look today, recent news, current events, CNN. I want to blast CNN here for a second. CNN, when they did their exit poll for the election, they listed by basically race and percentile of how many people voted for the current president, Donald Trump. And they listed white people and they put a percentage. And they listed black people and they put a percentage. They listed Hispanic people and they put a percentage. And then they did something that still I've yet to hear an apology for. They listed something else and put a percentage. And then they put Asian in a percentage. Not someone else, but something else.
Yeah,
That something else is Native people.
I saw that. I know what you're talking about. I saw that. Yeah.
So I think natives in this country, when we protest peacefully because we have respect for humanity and we have respect for the earth and we have more importantly, respect for ourselves. And I think because of that, we're not the squeaky wheel. And so we're ignored. You see?
Yeah.
So that's
So what would be our first step to bettering the relations?
Well, I think the first step with any whether it be atrocity or wrong is to actually take ownership of it. You see, people talk about healing. You have to understand, generationally, the hurt, the pain is in my DNA of what happened because I believe in familiar knowledge.
Yeah.
Meaning, everyone who came before me in my entire line, I feel and know what they felt and know, and I experience it in a different way. You see, because time really is of little relevance. To me, there is no difference between 500 and some years ago and today as far as the way I feel, you see?
Yeah.
So I think the first step is actually acknowledgement, not just putting it in a history book. When I was in high school, I got sent to the principal's office often during the 1 or 2 or 3 days that we touched anything to do with Native people, which was always for Thanksgiving. I would always get sent to the office because I disagreed with history the way the history teacher wanted to teach it because it wasn't accurate. And I knew the truth. And so I think you have to recognize a person being a person. Native people are still listed under the Department of the Interior under agriculture, meaning we're still livestock. The 1924 Forced Citizenship Act didn't apply to some nations. It certainly didn't apply to the 5 Nations Iroquois Confederacy, the Haudenosaunee people. Okay? And I think until the United States government takes the time to truly recognize the sovereignty of such nations, the Lakota as well. They're sovereign people. They're a nation within a nation, a country within a country. The Gustawenta, the two-row wampum belt, okay, with the Haudenosaunee people. Mm-hmm. That clearly states that the colonists and the Dutch would stay in their ship and the Haudenosaunee people would stay in their canoe, and they would go together forever as brothers through life, never interfering with each other's laws, customs, traditions, or beliefs. And yet, if you drive down the road without a driver's license, the first thing the state troopers or RMCPs want to do is club you like a seal. There's more atrocities and violence done to Native people nationwide by law enforcement. And as you know, I'm a retired SWAT officer. But there's more atrocities done to Native people than any other minority in the country, and yet no one knows about it.
Yeah, and let's not even get into the missing children.
Well, yeah, and let's not forget missing and murdered Indigenous women. Do you know statistically, out of every 10 Native women, 9 of them will be abused? Not by natives. They will either be sexually assaulted or murdered. That is huge. And yet, nobody seems to take notice. I'm thankful. That's one thing, and everyone has their opinion, and I'm going to stay out of the political loop of this. But that's one thing I'm thankful for that the current president did do, and that was he signed the bill for missing and murdered Indigenous women. Prior to that, you could be a Native family. You could know that your mother or sister or wife or daughter calls you before leaving work, going to work. You know exactly where she is. Every day she does this. It's the way her pattern is. And then one day she goes missing. Well, like any concerned relative, you're going to go and report it to law enforcement. Well, law enforcement won't even investigate it. And then when they find them dead 6 months or a year or 5 years later, guess what? They still won't do an investigation because they get into jurisdictional and passing the buck, and it's an FBI issue. It's blah, 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 blah. And there's no justice.
Yeah.
So that's, when we're looking at something like that, to me, that is a huge, huge thing. And especially on Thanksgiving, one thing that I think everyone should be thankful for is the fact that they don't have to, in 2020, be treated in such a dehumanizing way, because that's life as a Native.
Yeah. It seems like there's so much corruption in government today. Do you find that it's possible that the U.S. government buys out certain elders or certain natives that sell out their own people? Does that happen?
Well, that's happened since the beginning of time with people in general.
Yeah.
And I do think it happens. I think more so than that today. I mean, I think people have gotten away from traditional forms of government, and they've been influenced heavily by Americanization. And with that comes all the problems America has. The difference is you don't have the resources America has to combat those issues. And so when you get corruption on a reserve, the American Indian movement, okay, and I don't talk very much on the American Indian movement. I am not an AIM member. My father was an AIM member. And if you want to do a show on AIM, I can get you plenty of people who would be willing to discuss it with you. But with that said, the entire American Indian movement started because of corruption on a reservation, okay? And Wounded Knee, when that happened, that was over corruption on a reservation. And you had basically, if you drew a picture, draw 3 lines on a piece of paper. To say the far left or far right, whichever way you want to start, you had AIM members trying to protect traditional people. To the far other side, you had federal FBI agents. Well, in the middle comes the goons from the corrupt reservation, and they start shooting back and forth both ways and then back out. And that's what caused the bloodshed. So, yes, corruption does happen. I think we went away from traditional forms of government. Among my people, we went away from condoled chiefs, and we started having elected chiefs. I'm personally not a big fan of that, but I think corruption happens. I think people get paid off often for their votes, and it keeps that seed of power of corruption perpetuating.
Does it bother you that there's so much talk, especially in the news today, about reparations for slavery? My wife and I discuss this sometimes, and we believe that if we're going to make reparations to anybody, it should be to the Native Americans first. What do you feel about that?
I think, as a whole, this is my personal opinion. I want to be very clear on that, okay? I don't want it to reflect on anyone else. My personal opinion is horrible things have happened in the history of the formation of this country. Horrible things have happened specifically to people of color. And unfortunately, I think we're at a point in time where the dynamics have changed. Because now very often I see people who are not of color who really have, not to say that there's not people who are still very racial out there. There are. But I see a lot of people who aren't racial, who automatically, when a person of color sees them, they treat them in a combative way. Okay? Mm-hmm. And that's from that generational hurt. Okay? Meanwhile, all that does is perpetuate racism, because now that person who wasn't racist feel some kind of way about the way they were treated by somebody of color. And so it causes division. I don't think that one person done wrong has bearing over another person who has been done wrong as to who deserves reparations. I think that if for instance, in this specific case, you've asked me about natives versus, black people, as far as reparations and who should get reparations first. Well, my thing is, start somewhere. I personally, I don't care where the government starts with trying to fix the damage they've done. We're all people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay, we're all human beings at the end of the day. We are all part of, and regardless of your belief, creation. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so, if someone does something wrong, the first place to start is somewhere towards positive inclusion as opposed to exclusion. You see, this country has been living on the foundation of exclusion for so long. I don't think it even knows how to even include its own people.
Yeah,
this country is no longer white America. It's not. I mean, it never really was white America, but at one point, as far as the government is concerned, it was. It's no longer that way. And it has the melting pot, the great experiment. Well, we're coming to a conclusion with that. And that is, at this point, you are hard-pressed to find a single family. Pick any family in America. It's rare that you're going to find a family that is all white, or all black, or all native, or all Hispanic, or all French, or all German, or all whatever nationality. Okay, you'll find people who have moved here in the last 3 generations that still can have such a claim. And you're going to have people who are proud who are going to say, I'm native, my whole family, my whole line's been native. And you know what? To some living on the reserve, that's true. But most people out here in society cannot boast such a claim. So we need to develop an inclusive mindset instead of an exclusive mindset. And as far as reparations, I've had people bring up to me, well, what do you think the 40 acres and a mule was? Well, you know what, man? My thought on that is that's not where we are in time. And atrocities occurred well after that. So get off of that mindset. Be inclusive. We need to start somewhere first with acknowledging there's a problem. And then from there, we need to start working to stop whatever the root cause of that problem is and then build from there positively.
Yeah. So, get rid of all the lies first and then see where that leads you.
Yes, and it's going to be different for different people. You see, the starting point since we're on this topic, for black people, I think is going to be greatly different than the starting point for native people. You see? But there has to be a starting point. And in my opinion, the first thing is recognizing there's a problem.
Yeah. Well, Lance, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. I hope maybe we taught some people something, and people enjoy the show. Do you have a certain cause or a certain website where you would like to plug or send people to?
For the vast topics of discussion that we discussed, there's not a single location I could send anybody to. I would say a really good place to just kind of get in and have fun and kick around and look at different things is the Department of War Archives. Believe it or not, you can find a lot of historical stuff that no one else even remembers in that archive.
Yeah, I know you don't have a personal website or anything. It's normally the part where people would promote their personal website or something like that. So I was just wanting to see if there was something.
I do have a 501c3. We are on Facebook, which is, I started many years ago to do a powwow in King for cultural diversity. And it was one of my ways of kind of bringing something different to the community that I served. And so, of course, I have Redhawk's Education and Cultural Awareness Council, which is, of course, named after me. And we have a Facebook page, which is, I'm not even sure off the top of my head how it's actually listed, but you could put, City of King Powwow or Redhawk City of King Powwow, and I'm sure you'll find something in reference to it.
Awesome. So I encourage everybody to check that out if you're interested. And
I obviously was not ready for that question.
That's all right. Do you want any parting words of advice for our listeners?
I would just like to say, everybody, walk a little bit more softly on the earth. Think a little more environmentally, and think a little more inclusive. If you have a good mind, walk your talk. Don't say something and then not be that way. Walk your talk.
Awesome, and it was a fascinating conversation. We'll be right back on Conflict Radio right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. That was Lance Redhawk Shauger. Now, I've known Lance since, I guess I was in the 3rd grade, growing up together in New Jersey, and it was a great conversation, and I certainly want to thank him for coming on the show today. I'm sure that it wasn't an easy thing for him to do, but thank you very much for coming on, Lance. Remember, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on all of your normal podcast catchers, including Apple iTunes, Spreaker, and Google Podcasts, and every other podcast catcher. You can catch us there. That's going to do it for us today. I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. Remember, batten down the hatches and be safe.